Chris, as we look at these live pictures of the president-elect just hours from his swearing in and amidst a flurry of last-minute pardons by President Biden, what are your thoughts on this moment right now?
Well, you know, Amika, I've been worried about how a democracy keeps the shell of democracy. In other words, continues to have elections and the formality of democracy, but actually fades like it has in Hungary. And I'm worried at how that's happening. And I'm watching specifically what's happened to the U.S. Senate. The United States Senate has enjoyed the power of advising consent. They are co-authors of these cabinet nominations. They say up or down. They have to have 50% or the person doesn't get approved. And in this time, I've watched people all of them have accepted Hegseth. It looks like he's going to be head of the Pentagon. I mean, that's a remarkable decision. Or that Bobby Kennedy's going to be head of HHS. Really? You know, these are decisions which are unimaginable for the party to pick somebody who's actually questioning how we dealt with Dr. Jonas Salk dealt with polio. I mean, the fact is, this is an extraordinary decision. And I think of what happened to the senators on the edge. Why doesn't Cassidy or Collins or Tillis, how come there aren't any senators that are willing to say, wait a minute, we're here to advise and consent, and I don't think Hegseth should be head of anything, let alone the U.S. Pentagon. And this is where people like Grassley, who's the toughest guy in the world on candidates for any cabinet position, really tough, getting into their taxes and things like that. He's going to go along with enthusiasm for Hegseth. What happened to advise and consent? There was the best movie ever, maybe on politics in Washington, which was Advise and Consent. On the right of the United States Senate to say no. This guy for Secretary of State is an old lefty and a dangerous character, and we're not going to put him into office and let him become Secretary of State. What happened to that power? They've yielded it to Trump. It's been yielded up in an undemocratic way to this president. That is really scary, and it's happening right this week. They're going to approve of probably all these cabinet appointments. They're doing it by relinquishing their power to say, no, Mr. President, this is too far. Hegseth has got problems, personal problems. He's got management problems, and he should not be there. And they're not doing it. Why aren't they doing it? Because they are being intimidated. In the next primaries, they're going to face primary opponents who are totally with the MAGA base, and they're scared to death of them. This is undemocratic, and this is where we're headed. And that's the big picture. And so I worry about that. I worry about him, Trump, pardoning all the, as he calls the J6 heroes. Give me a break. They went into the Capitol where I worked for all those years and destroyed the place. And they made it clear that they were trying to bring down the government and possibly kill some of our leaders like Pelosi and Mike Pence. They were in there to do it. And thank God the Metropolitan Police arrived in time to stop them. But it was only because the police came in and protected our Constitution and our republic. It's only because the cops showed up that they stopped.
Right.
And this guy's going to pardon these people. It's unbelievable.
John, we have reporting. Certainly what Chris has just laid out is the great fear of many, many people. Ali, this morning, I know you also and other people reporting that there are going to be a lot of these nominees that are going to go through. There still are a few question marks out there right now. As Ali Vitale reported, and you've reported also, Tulsi Gabbard seen to be in trouble in getting to that 50 threshold. RFK Jr. again, in part because there are a lot of conservatives that do not want a pro-choice liberal or progressive running HHS in trouble. We keep hearing Kash Patel as someone who, when that name comes up, obviously a lot of the questions there. And on Pete Hegseth, I think you still have the question of where is Lisa Murkowski going to be? Where is Susan Collins going to be? Where is Mitch McConnell going to be? And I brought up before Todd Young, who has spent his adult life concerned about the national security of the United States, as projected from armed forces. So Chris brings up a lot of salient points, a lot of reasons that a lot of Americans are fearful. There is reporting, though, that there still may be a fight ahead at least for a few of these nominees.
Yeah, we could tick through them real quick. A lot on Pete Hegseth. Senator Joni Ernst was seen by many as the possible swing no vote against him. That's no longer the case, but you're right. Senator Young and others still remain unknown where they stand. I will simply say people I've talked to in Trump world feel like that Hegseth is in. Their internal whip code counts. They think Hegseth will get through. The other three are more up for grabs. President Trump, about to be President Trump again, has privately confided to people he feels that Tulsi Gabbard's the one most in trouble. He recognizes that's his own calls that he and his advisors have made, and simply his own consumption of the media coverage, which he does constantly. They suggest that she might be the one most in trouble. You raised the reasons why Robert F. Kennedy Jr., though he might pick up some Democratic votes. There's some Republicans are anxious about him. Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president, in fact, has been trying to rally some Republicans on the Senate to oppose Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because he is indeed pro-choice. And then there's Kash Patel, who has flown under the radar for the most part. He hasn't had any hearings yet. He spent some time on the Hill, but he was overshadowed by others. But I think it was a tell. We talked about this last week when Pam Bondi, Trump's attorney general, had her hearings, and there is a sense that she will be approved without much difficulty. She had to field so many questions about Kash Patel. It felt like it was Patel's hearing.
Yeah.
And Patel is the one who has outlined the enemies list that so many people are concerned about. So I think that's a preview, perhaps, that when that hearing gets scheduled, and it hasn't yet, when that hearing gets scheduled, he may have a tough go as well.
And you've written at length since the election that we need to, as I often say, quoting an old admiral, we need to make sure that we separate the ground noise from the signal. Mm-hmm. It is important to remember, again, this is not going to be cut and dry when we're talking about the courts. There are going to be Judge Eileen Cannons who are going to give Donald Trump whatever he wants. There are going to be, though, justices from the most conservative circuit, the 11th Circuit, that are going to push back, have already pushed back on something very personal to him, as they did throughout the first term. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 that President Trump had to go do the one thing he did not want to do, and that is stand before the judge and have judgment entered in of him being a felon. But the Supreme Court 5-4 voted against that. We brought up the 38 Republicans that listened to Elon Musk's threats and Donald Trump's threats, and then voted no against that CR. So it is going to be a balancing act for all of us to try to figure out, to try to separate the signal from the ground noise, to try to figure out where the real risks and the real threats are, and what are the things that, as you've said before, we need to let pass.
Yeah, and I think you and I have spent now, again, about 10 years talking about this question of institutions and right. To what extent they were going to stand up to what we were seeing and not. And, our institutions are not going to be better than us. And so in some ways, what the spectacle we are seeing today and the transition of power we're seeing is part of kind of two deep tendencies in American life. There's a generous tendency. We're a country of immigrants that accepts people from everywhere in the world, walk down the street any direction from here, and it's people from everywhere. And we're a country that had slavery and segregation and mass incarceration. We're a country that is capable of allowing so many people, as we and I talked about last week, to start their businesses, have dreams, build things. And we're a country that makes life very, very hard for people right now. To have a house, a lot of people not starting families, not having children, because they don't feel the rudiments of a life there. We are both of these things. And, the conversation we were having with Doris also, I don't think the conversation we've been having this morning should depress people. Part of what I mean to say in that this is about us is that you don't have to wait to see what he does. There is work for us to do right now and over these 4 years in rebuilding all these conditions of the country, rebuilding the things you were talking about. Those are things everyone can do. Those are things about how our neighborhoods function, how the companies we work for function, how we as journalists do our jobs. This is not, I think the dynamic of waiting to see what he does is a poisonous dynamic, but it is also an abdication for all of us. The health of our country actually depends on millions of choices we all make every day.
Right.
And there is work to do to ensure that that more generous tendency in American life defeats the other one.
And, Willie, as Anand says, and as he's pointed out several times, sort of channeling the boss, Bruce Springsteen. You can waste your summers praying in vain for a savior to rise from these streets. And I think Anand has brought up such a great point that it was like, okay, Rod Rosenstein's going to save us from this, and Mueller's going to save us from this, and just go down the list. And Anand's point time and time again is, our government is as good as we are, and it's up to us.